Hello, I'm Lidia Lae. Welcome to another episode of Culture Shapers, where I interview world experts, authors, influencers, and creatives who are making a real difference in our society and culture. They're everyday people, but making a significant contribution. Today, we have a very special guest, Natalie Yan-Chatonsky. She's an innovation consultant with a deep interest in social well-being, DEI, and the longevity economy for women. She's also the author of the award-winning book, The Art of Full-Time Living, which I've got here, Design a Meaningful and Connected Life. Such a gorgeous book. So welcome, Natalie.
Thank you so much for having me on your program, Lydia. I'm really looking forward to our chat today.
It's an honor to have you on the program. I've just been looking at your book, reading through it, and just loving what I'm seeing. Now, it actually was a finalist for the Australian Business Book Awards in 2023. And
Yeah, pick two categories actually for the health and well-being category and also for the cover design by Christina Lindberg, who's a Danish book designer who I collaborated with for the cover and the interior design.
fantastic. I can see it's just really beautifully presented. So, and just the content, it's just so engaging. It's particularly targeted for women who are going through transition in the midlife. But also what I find that what you've shared is really helpful for many women also who are going through transitions. It's the universal, in many ways, keys and principles, ideas that you share. So I've just been loving what I'm reading. And Natalie, I'd like for you just to share with us a little bit more about your cultural background, your story. So over to you.
Sure. So my parents migrated to Australia in the 60s from Hong Kong. So it was very early days of when there weren't a lot of Asians, including Chinese, living in Sydney. So I grew up in a very white neighborhood, and there were very few Asians in my primary and high school. And I guess I fitted in to a degree, but at the same time also felt a little bit different at times.
Yes.
And then I guess it was as I grew older and more confident and more worldly and traveled the world and spent time in Japan as an exchange student after I finished high school that I really learnt to accept the cultural differences elsewhere, and as well as in my own family and myself, and having that perspective of being from an immigrant family, but then also appreciating Australian culture as well as my Asian heritage, as well as what language can bring to the way we think, because I guess learning other languages, you really hear and understand the nuances that language can bring to the way we see ourselves and look at concepts and describe things and see things, and whether there's positive or negative associations and connotations with certain words and expressions and cultural experiences and rituals.
Yeah, no, totally can relate to that. That language is just so powerful in shaping ourselves. I mean, what extraordinary experiences you've had in Japan and elsewhere. And that whole concept of language. I remember when my daughter came to me and, she was only 6 years old. She's 11 now. And she shared how, Mum, I don't feel Chinese because I speak English. I feel English. And so that the power of language and what it does in shaping our identities and ourselves. And could I ask you, Natalie, so when you lived in Japan, so you also speak Japanese?
Yeah, look, it's probably the peak of my Japanese language skills was when I was studying at university. So not only did I do that year as a Rotary Exchange student between high school and university, but I also ended up returning back to Japan to do my third year of university. So by then, my fluency level and comprehension of reading and writing was probably at its peak third year uni, because I had to conduct all my studies in Japanese at a Japanese university. So I got credit for those courses that I did at Horsey University through my arts degree at Sydney Uni.
Fantastic. So, and you also speak Chinese?
Cantonese,
And
that's probably also a little bit rusty. I'd say my Japanese and French is better than my Cantonese
and
these
French.
days. I ended up marrying a Frenchman, so I met him quite early in my adult life,
What?
and we have one child who's just finished the HSC.
Congratulations. That's, well, yeah, a wonderful achievement for him, but also for you as a mum to see he's gone through a major milestone of his life.
Definitely. And, I've known this moment and this year was coming for a very long time. And the work that I've done over the last few years and really appreciating how that shift of, in my case, it's my one and only child, but I've spoken to so many women who have told me about how when their last youngest child goes through a major shift from being like no longer at school, or they might have moved out of home, and the liberation that comes with this feeling of knowing that, of course, my adult child still needs me to a degree, but the role that I play is very different. And so I guess for me, in the lead up to this stage of my care responsibilities,
Mm.
I knew that I also needed to look ahead to paint the picture of what my new life is going to look like, even though my son's still living at home. But it's that liberation of having, I guess, less day-to-day responsibilities as a mum,
Definitely.
and being able to think bigger and also reset my dreams and coming back to my core self in terms of doing the things that are really important to me.
That's wonderful, Natalie. So that's led you to full-time lives, correct? And you founded full-time lives to support midlife and older women in designing meaningful and purposeful lives. So just share with us a bit about the backstory, how you came to that.
Sure. So my last full-time job was as an innovation manager at a financial services company. And there were a couple of things in both my personal life as well as at work that I was observing, and that was that change is very uncomfortable, whether it's major change in your career or at work or in your personal life. And in particular, when you make these major career shifts that can have a massive influence on how you feel about your identity. It could be positive or negative. And I guess my parents being baby boomers, and the talk and conversation around what does retirement mean in this modern age where we're relatively healthy,
Yes. Yes.
and is there even a need for people to retire? That concept just kept on coming up again and again in the work that I was doing, and also family conversations with my parents. And I guess in a Chinese
Mm.
immigrant family, work and identity is very much
Oh, I totally
intertwined.
agree. Totally agree.
And so it concerned me what happens with that void, that if there's also this social construct of retirement and stopping work, well, what
Mm.
implications does that have on how my parents would see themselves, as well as the relationship between them
Yes.
as a couple, and then me as the eldest daughter as well, in the negative flow and effect of that void.
Mm.
So that was occurring in the kind of in my day-to-day personal life. And then in parallel, I was involved in a big banking, like cross-industry banking initiative, where we were digitizing the payments
Yeah.
between banks,
Yeah.
and basically everything was becoming automated. And I thought it was a real exciting initiative because it meant that humans didn't need to do a lot of the manual work. There'd be
Correct.
greater efficiencies. But because my work involves doing a lot of qualitative research, one-on-one interviews with staff to understand what the customer needs are and employee needs, what I was realizing is that there was a lot of fear about the
Yeah.
change.
Correct. Yes.
Because even though no one was being made redundant at all, but there was this perception that
Mm.
the digitization of parts of their jobs would make them feel quite nervous and uncertain, and uh,
Mm.
start to fear, well, what would happen to their livelihood. So
Correct.
So it was very emotional, and kind of there was a perception that they might lose their jobs, and what else would they do? And that fear of, well, if I no longer have a job that's in the same shape as
Mm.
what it was before, what does that mean for me, not just career-wise, but as a person? Because our
Mm.
identity is so wrapped up in how we lead our day-to-day lives and jobs.
Yes. It's so,
So
isn't it?
yeah, so it's just kind of all those things just kept on reoccurring in my mind as themes that I was just wondering about, and thinking about how do you resolve that in your mind and also as a society, now that the definition of retirement no longer fits
Yes.
longevity. And also there was more and more research that I was coming across around positive aging, healthy aging, the longevity economy, what's the impact on the workforce now that we are living longer, and an aging population in Australia as well as globally. So there was probably more questions in my mind that were being prompted
Yes.
the more discovery that I was doing, and the more I was listening and observing what was going on in my own life and my job in the
Mhm.
work that I was doing around innovating in the banking sector.
Okay. Well, that's fascinating because they are really important questions, um, very much about our lived experience. What is there after our jobs? And I mean, how do you detangle your identity from your job? And what is there for people, right? After there is change, or if they are made redundant, or if they retire. So those are very high level questions which you pursued, but I love the way that you use qualitative data because I think that captures the depth of the lived experience. And so then this led to your book and addressing that. And so your book emphasizes the importance of social connections and storytelling in achieving a meaningful life.
Yeah.
You just share with us like a personal experience that illustrates how these elements have transformed your own journey.
So I would say that over the course of applying a lot of these learnings about the longevity economy and the importance of redefining retirement, and also how women and men age differently, and also menopause, obviously, at
Yeah.
midlife plays a really important role, and we're speaking about it more and more. So the gender difference, and also having to prepare earlier and having a mindset that's positive about the process of going through menopause and aging, and setting yourself up well for the long term. All
Mm.
the factors of well-being from a physical, mental, and financial and social perspective has been very much front of mind for the work that I ended up pursuing through my business full-time lives, and hence writing a book for midlife women, because I felt like women need to be better informed on
Yeah.
why you really need to be very intentional and proactively design the life that you want, because no one's going to do it for you.
Correct.
Even if you're in a happy relationship, and even if you've got a great relationship with your adult children, really it's up to you to connect with what your strengths are and where you feel that other people value you. And so that's also an understanding of the world and how it's changing around you, to see how you can continue to evolve and feel like you're making a contribution, and that sense of purpose that's really important.
Mm.
So I've embodied a lot of the learnings from doing the workshops that I've been running, as well as the one-on-one interviews. And also, I guess, wanting to share a lot of the insights in the form of the book,
Mm-hmm.
hence writing the stories that I was hearing and capturing it in the form of the vignettes, along with the main narrative of my learnings in the book. And I guess, like anything, it takes practice.
Old,
So, and it takes a lot of time to reverse some old habits, reestablish new ways of how you want to work that's going to serve you from a well-being perspective, and also cutting out and auditing and constantly rechecking what no longer serves you for your future self,
yes.
so that you can continue to evolve, not just what you're learning, but how you're designing your lifestyle. So I've done a lot of that over the last couple of years, and being very, very intentional and never taking anything for granted, that what has served me well up until a certain stage in my life isn't necessarily what will continue to serve me well going into my future. And so being very clear about, in the long term, where do I want to go, and
Mm.
how do I need to establish the stepping stones to get there. So I guess the most recent example of where the social connections have really opened up new opportunities for me in a way that was unexpected would be, probably just over a month ago. A very good friend of mine and a mentor of mine, who's always been able to see my potential
Yes.
and has always planted the seed of what might take me a few years to eventually get to, but she's always been the first to just put it in my mind as an idea. So she was one of my first friends who actually planted the seed of suggesting that I write my book, The Art of Full-Time Living.
Yes.
And it took me many years to eventually come around to actually start doing it. But she believed that I could do it. She thought that the things that I was learning through my business full-time lives would be of value to others.
Yes.
So having someone who understood me well and the value that I could bring to others
Mm.
was hugely inspiring. And I've learnt to really listen to what she says, as well as other people around me who similarly can see my potential and really believe in the things that I can do to transfer my skills and my passion and purpose to new circumstances and new groups of people. So most recently, she said, I'd like to plant a seed. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, another one? You already planted the seed of the book. I've executed on
That was
that.
a
It's out
massive
in the
project.
world.
Correct.
Yeah, it was. And I'm really proud of that. And she said, what else could I do? And
Yes.
she said, Nat, I've been observing that you've continued to do a lot of research, and you're constantly looking for the latest and greatest, and constant, still asking questions
Mm.
around how midlife women can evolve and age well. What about doing a PhD?
Wow.
So this friend, Paulina LaRocca, has just finished her PhD, and she
Wonderful.
said, I can introduce you to one of the supervisors. At the time, the initial reaction was, I'm not ready for this. I would eventually like to do it, but I don't feel like it's the right time, and I need to wait on a few other opportunities to come my way. And she said, look, you can make the decisions later, but at this point in time, unless you actually apply, it's not really a real opportunity until you actually put it out there, act on it, and then you can decide, like, if it means postponing it or pausing it, or maybe it's not right for you, but at least create the opportunity for yourself, and only you can do that.
Yes.
So I thought, I also have become accustomed to listening to my own body when it comes to that nervousness, you know, feeling like your throat's a bit stuck and a bit of a sick feeling. When I start to feel that, I have started to not necessarily run away, but actually really interrogate what is making me feel so fearful, and is
Yes.
it healthy fear?
Yes.
Because maybe if it is making me fearful, this means that this is highly uncomfortable.
Yes.
But if we want to grow and get out of our comfort zones, the
Yes.
only way to do it is to actually keep nudging forward
Correct.
and moving, you know, it like the idea of writing a book, of course, if you've never done it before, you don't know what you don't know. You kind of just think, oh my goodness, going from a blank sheet of paper to having something that people
Mm,
can physically hold, that's a massive
that's
mind shift. And it sounds impossible, but then when you break it down, it's a
yeah.
step-by-step process. So I guess in many ways that was practice for then realizing, well, similarly, going from not having much of an idea what's involved in
Mm,
producing and researching and publishing and going through the PhD research
yes.
pathway. Well, there's people around you. That's what supervisors are for, and
Right.
the whole academic community
Correct.
who in these last few weeks have been incredibly generous in sharing at this phase, stage one, what is exactly involved, their lived experience, and just listening. And all that is there. But I'm so glad I actually did go ahead and apply for it, and everything's all set up and I'm enrolled. But it has happened very quickly. And I really feel that when you're in tune with the purpose that you want to serve, there's many different ways that you can go about doing it, and you can manifest maybe, you know, certain opportunities you create and apply for certain proposals and pitch for the work. Sometimes you can't control the timing and other people's decision-making process, but when people who know you very well hold up a mirror in front of you and also can project your future self, and if you were to continue going down the path that you're currently on, but taking some extra steps in getting outside of your comfort zone, that combination, that confidence that they have in you, as well as the networks and the opportunities, they have the foresight and the visibility that they can then present to you as something concrete for you to then pursue.
Mm,
That is incredibly helpful. And that is a contributing factor to why the social well-being
mm,
is so important for women to prioritize at this midlife phase, when we've got lots of care responsibilities of
mm,
adult children and or aging family members who are also, their life expectancy is extended, but then at the same time, there is that period after their health span finishes and they are more dependent on others. And in Australia,
yes.
there is often the higher likelihood of the woman, the adult woman, who is stepping in to take them to doctor's appointments, to
That's so
try
true.
and find the flexibility in their lives and adjust their careers and work in order to be a service to those family members.
Yeah.
So I'm also very conscious that this has an economic impact on women,
Mm,
and it does contribute to not just the gender pay gap in terms of the types of roles that we are applying for and are staying in, but also the super gender pay gap. So
so
that
true.
is something that as a society, as employers, and working in financial services, it's something that we need to address.
Totally agree with you. And I love what you shared, all the little nuggets of being very intentional about your life. Because, I mean, let's face it, financially, being able to take hold of that and have control over your own freedom financially, but also tapping into that whole social network, that wisdom that's found in the community. And I love what you shared about your friend believing in you, that in many ways we are all living on borrowed belief. We actually need, people to believe in us. And I think as parents, we give our children that belief and then they rise from that. So we all require that borrowed belief from others. So just nuggets of gold, Natalie, what you've just shared. And I was just so thrilled for you to take that PhD journey because I found in my own life that it is quite transformative. You'll never be the same after the PhD.
I'm
And
only a couple of weeks in and I'm already feeling it. I'm being surrounded by a whole new community of people who just over a month ago I'd never met, but already they're so inclusive and sharing their knowledge as well as their, I guess, lots of very practical tips on how I can get started because it's still fresh in their memories as well as they're just so generous. And to be welcomed at midlife into a whole new community and professional community that can lead to other new opportunities from a professional point of view as well as new friendships. That's so
right.
valuable.
It is. No, it's such an enriching process that you're going to be going through. Now, as we wrap up, Natalie, in the art of full-time living, you discuss the whole concept of midlife quest for greater economic freedom and autonomy. So just share with us 3 practical steps that you would recommend for women beginning this journey, with especially those balancing existing commitments.
Mm-hmm. The biggest thing is to have a vision of your long-term future self. That's
Fantastic.
the first one. The second one is in being able to break down that long-term vision of yourself into much smaller chunks.
Yes,
And then the third one is actually that iterative design process of looking at those smaller little blocks and steps to take whatever the smallest possible step is to move forward,
definitely.
review it,
Yes.
reevaluate it, see if it is in the right direction. If it's serving you well and you want to keep going, then keep going. But if you find in the review process that it's not quite what you expected, then because it's only one small step, you haven't really lost much. Nothing's completely irreversible. So therefore, you can then take another step to
Right.
keep going and exploring. So nothing is ever lost. You're just constantly learning and pivoting and redesigning as you go. And that's why it's really important to be very clear about that longer term, big picture vision that you have for yourself that you're moving towards.
That's wonderful. Having kind of that idea of your ideal self and building the steps and knowing that even if you make a mistake, you learn from that, you pivot and you keep moving forward to that bigger vision in life.
Yeah. And it's not a mistake. It's part of the joy of being
That's
surprised.
right. There's never a mistake in life, but always learning. We're always evolving. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, I really love that. That's so helpful, Natalie. So thank you so much. It's just been wonderful hearing your journey, your background, and what you're doing, which is really meaningful and filling that gap because I'm not sure whether I've actually come across any midlife specialists who are doing what you're doing. So, yeah, very enriching, what you're providing. So, I really highly recommend Natalie's book, The Art of Full-Time Living. It's just really beautiful, and the content in there is just so encouraging. And looking at other women's lives and how they do it, I always find that having that portal to other women's lives, and how people do life, that's just a wonderful way for us to realize, you know what, I can adapt that. I can actually do this. It gives us this can-do mentality. And it's that shift in mindset that we all need. So thank you again, Natalie. It's been a real pleasure having you on Culture Shapers.
I really enjoyed our chat, Lydia. Thank you so much for having me on Culture Shapers.
Thank you again. And if you want more resources, feel free to go on www.lidialae.com. So thank you again for joining us. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye.